Hey, it's Andy Yanis here with another episode of Let's Rage Coogs, presented by the Saxenian family. For those of you that have not heard, Let's Rage Coogs, the unofficial Houston post-game show, in particular in regards to the basketball post-game shows, will be presented by the Saxenian family for the next 30 post-game shows of the season. And what a game it was today in the afternoon, Saturday afternoon, between Houston and Kent State, a scrappy Kent State team that gave Houston all that it could handle and all that it wanted to, as the Cougars were able to overcome that really tough Kent State team and came out victorious 49-44. Marcus Sasser and Jamal Shed had two key pivotal clutch go-ahead shots towards the final minute. Houston was able to buckle down on defense and they escaped with a victory. But before I toss it over to you, Dayon and Chris, I also want to give a shout out to our other sponsors for this episode of Let's Rage Coogs, starting with Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Micro Collective. They are the entity behind the Star Pizza commercials, who is also a sponsor for today's Let's Rage Coogs. Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976. And one of our other sponsors, of course, a big shout out to BB's, the home of Tex Orland's Cooking. BB's, they have multiple locations across the Houston area, and be sure to follow them on social media at BB's Tex Orland's on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And last but not least, also want to give a shout out to the Fritz Kennel. The Fritz Kennel is a family-owned and operated business that specializes in dog and cat boarding, daycare, and bathing. So if you're going out of town, the Fritz Kennels are you guys to take care of your furry friends. On that note, once again, Houston victorious 49-44 over Kent State. Joining me as always, Chris Gardner of the Houston Roundball Review, Dayon Dunlap. Toss it over to whoever wants to take it first. What were your overall initial thoughts of Houston's victory over Kent State?
Well, first, and Coach Sampson touched on it. Kent State's defense looked like Houston's defense. I mean, they were aggressive from the guards, perimeter. They pressured Houston in the half court, forced them out of their shots. And so, I mean, kudos to Kent State. Matchups, we'll see how great they do the rest of the season. But for today, they gave the Cougs everything they wanted and then some. Cougs found a way to win. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, my main takeaway, like Chris said, well, first, how good Kent State was defensively, but not only that, Marcus Sasser as a closer. That was kind of my biggest takeaway, his ability to close. And although he's struggling from shooting from three, it just kind of just shows his evolution as a basketball player, as he's developing, continuing to evolve, and not so much dependent upon making the three and having the ability to create off the dribble and just make timely clutch shots in big moments. That was kind of my biggest takeaway.
And Dan, you can go and talk about this. 23 turnovers, almost doubled the previous season high of 12. Very un-Coug-like. All those things, they still find a way to win. They have to play better, need more production from a lot of different people. Kent State was a big reason for a lot of the struggles today, but we found out Jamal Shed had been sick this week. Ramon Walker,
a long list of players.
Ramon Walker was missed the game because he was ill. J.V. Francis was sick this week. So a lot of different, I think the flu or whatever you want to call it, had gone through the team. But Coach Sampson did not want to take away anything from Kent State's performance. He thought there was a tougher team, but his team found a way to win. And that's the bottom line.
Absolutely. And no, I think that's the story of the game, in particular in regards to those turnovers, because that's really what kept Kent State in the game. I mean, Houston's defense was phenomenal, especially their half-court defense for much of the night. They held Kent State to 44 points. There were two different stretches. The final, it was 8 minutes and 30 seconds of the first half. They held Kent State to not a single field goal to close out the half, and then turn around when they were in the middle of that 15-0 run. They held Kent State scoreless for over 7 minutes of game action, which, I mean, that was really the difference in the game. Even though when Houston was able to put or build that cushion, they got up 39-30 in the middle of that 15-0 run. It seemed like Houston had created separation, and Kelvin talked about it a little bit. He had to make substitutions because their players had gotten tired, and really it was just the freshman struggle, like Calvin Sampson has mentioned throughout in regards to inconsistency performances. In particular, Jarris Walker, he struggled tonight. He had to deal with a a bit of foul trouble as well, but overall it didn't seem like he was able to get into the flow of the game. Credit to him, he was back in the game in the final minute. He came up with a big block towards the final possessions of Kent State. But overall, those turnovers, because whenever Houston was able to take care of the ball, that was a big rally point where Kent State struggled to. They just couldn't score on them in a half court set whenever Houston didn't turn the ball over. Now in transition, that was a different story. They were doing a good job of attacking Houston on the fast break and getting to the free throw line, which I'm looking at the stats right now. Kent State, they only shot 8 for 11 from the free throw line, but it seemed like they were the most aggressive team from throughout the night. And even Kelvin Sampson said it. They looked more like a Cougar basketball team than Houston did tonight.
And Kent State started the game hot. I mean, they, as Coach said, we'll hear hopefully, from postgame, they started out, they punched the Cougs in the mouth. Very few teams do that. It was 12-3 Kent State. And we can talk about it and nitpick and the turnovers, and it was not a typical Cougar performance in terms of points, turnovers, way too many turnovers, but they still found a way to win. They got to play better than this, clearly, but they got the W. They got to learn from it. A lot of things to learn from, for sure. But they got to win, setting up potentially being the number one ranked team in the poll come Monday, which means nothing in November.
Right. But the main thing is the main thing, and that's getting the win. And we've talked about it on this show, finding different ways to win. We've seen different players have big games, but what this shows that you can lean on the backbone of the culture as in that defense and that relentlessness to continue to compete, whether it's not going your way, continue to fight and continue to scrap and claw and get their way back into the game. And so this was a great win for me. I mean, a lot of people look at team names and feel like, oh, you should beat them by X amount of points. No, this is college basketball, and even in the NBA on a game-to-game basis, the worst team or any level for that matter. Basketball is a game of rhythm and makes, and Houston wasn't in a good rhythm from throughout this most of the game. I think one of the turning points for me also was the three that Tremont Mark made. And when he made that first three, if my memory serves me right, Marcus came down, made another three, and it felt like Houston kind of got into a rhythm and started playing into a rhythm, and that kind of fed into the defense. And that's when they were making Kent State go on that long drought from scoring. And so I was very impressed with this win and the grit and the fight. And like I said, Marcus' ability to close, and also Jamal Shea's ability to close as well, because he had a key floater as well that came in that gave Houston, I believe, a 2-possession lead at the time. And so I was just very impressed with the way that they won the game. I mean, Coach Sampson always said it's hard to win a game, and he never overstates how tough it is from a game-to-game basis. And Kent State, I mean, they really, really competed, and they really played the same defensive style like Houston, and like I'm sure we'll get the clip that I saw Andy's tweet, and he said Coach Sampson said they looked more like Houston than Houston did, and Chris, you just mentioned that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in regards to specifically that game that they needed, something that Kelvin and Marcus Sasser said, especially just the way it played out. This is the first time all season long where they've had to execute in the clutch. And like you said, Dayon, Jamal Shead and Marcus Sasser came up big for Houston in that department. They both hit 2 big go-ahead shots. But just overall, something that Kelvin Sampson reiterated during his post-game availability was, obviously, like Dan, like you said, from Kent State, the name, the perspective, it was an ugly game just from an offensive standpoint. But still, the most important thing is that Houston figured out a way to come out victorious and win. Now, when you look at really one of the other key figures in this game, it was the rebounding battle, because Houston did a really good job of getting a whole bunch of different opportunities and being able to close out possessions on defense as well. They out-rebounded Kent State by 23, 56. They had 56 rebounds. Kent State only had 33, and that's something that Kelvin Sampson said. Even though the shots weren't falling, they just found a way to win, and that's what good teams do. And that we're going to see it in the clip in a second, but there was one where Kelvin was looking at the stat sheet and he was looking at the offensive numbers, and he went, ooh, ouch. But then he pointed out, there's not a lot of teams in the country that will be able to come out with a victory when just shooting 32% from the field and turning the ball over 23 times.
2 for 17 from 3. They missed 8 free throws, 23 turnovers, and they still found a way to win. So, and at some point, they're going to lose this season. They will not go undefeated. I'll be shocked amazed if that happens. But right now, they're finding ways to win. They're learning while they're doing it. Jarris Walker seemed just out of it today. He passed up a few shots down the stretch, some turnovers. Everybody had turnovers today. If he would have played in uniform, we might have picked up a turnover. I mean, every Cougar that played seemed like they had a turnover. So 4, 3, 4, 2, 2. It was just one of those weird games. And part of that is for Kent State. Credit them for the defense. Cougs were out of rhythm. The guys being sick kind of disrupted the flow of practice this week. That was a factor, not the only factor. But 49-44, we don't get beauty points for wins. All you care about is W's and L's. That's what Cougs got to win. That's it.
And real quickly, before we hear from Kelvin Sampson, we do have to give shout out to our sponsor, Row. But first, once again, you are watching or listening however you may be listening or watching, whether it's live on YouTube. For those of you watching, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will be back. It'll be back-to-back Let's Rage Coogs, the first ever doubleheader with Let's Rage Coogs shortly after we finish up here. After recapping everything that happened between Houston and Kent State, I'm gonna head over to TDCU Stadium, and Chris, you should join me for the walk across towards the stadium. Chris is not sold. The Rockets have a play. He's got a Rockets game to catch.
Yeah, I'm going to Rockets OKC.
Once again, it is Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Sampson family for the next 30 post-game shows regarding the Houston basketball team, the unofficial Houston post-game show. And a big shout out to our guys at the Fritz Kennel, who, once again, they are a family-owned and operated business that specialize in dog and cat boarding, daycare, and baths. The Fritz Kennel, and if you are going out of town, you need somewhere to leave your fur friends, be sure to check out our guys at the Fritz Kennel. Big shout out to BB's. BB's is the home of Tex Orleans Cookings. BB's have multiple locations across the Houston area, and be sure to check them out on social media at BB's Tex Orleans. That's BB's Tex Orleans on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And last but not least, our big shout out to Hoop and Holler, the Houston Micro Collective. They are the entities behind the commercials you see with SACAV, Star Pizza with the Anthony Jones, and all of them. And on the topic of Star Pizza, they are our fourth and final sponsor. Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976. And on that note, I'll toss it over to Kelvin Sampson postgame. Here's what he had to say in regards to Houston's 49-44 victory over Kent State.
That's the first time all year somebody's punched us in the mouth. We're used to punching other people in the mouth around here. But our team punched us in the mouth. Coming into today, I think we're averaging 9 turnovers a game or less. I don't know exactly. You guys, I'm sure we'll look it up. But 23 turnovers. I was just impressed with Kent State's toughness. I mean, this could be an NCAA tournament team, probably a 14 seed, 15 seed. Our big guys, of course, when you make open shots, you make your free throws, you make your bunnies around the game looks different, obviously. But you know what? That's too simplistic. That takes away from what Kent State did to us. And I'm going to address that too. They look more like a Cougar basketball team than we did, and that's a credit to Rob and his staff. They did a much better job getting their team ready. They did a much better job getting their team prepared than we did. So, coaching staff has to take responsibility. We got to do a better job getting our guys, but this program's never not going to be a toughness program. And there was a really, really tough team on that floor today, but it just happened to be Coach Sendro's team. But I was proud of the win. I'm throwing it away, mind you. You guys can do whatever narrative you want. A month from now, it's going to count as a win. And I'm proud of the way we kept fighting. We out-rebounded that team by 23. Soft teams don't do that. We play tough too. They were just a little, their defense kept pushing us out. You know, and one of the things I noticed too is when our freshmen on the floor, we run a play, but we don't know how to execute it yet. So early in the season, every coach in every program in the month of November, you're looking for things to crack down on, tighten up, so when you get to January and February, you can be better. So I'm not going to overreact to this game. I was disappointed in the way we started, but all hats off to Coach Sindroff, Jim Christian. Jim used to be the head coach at Kent State, Boston College, been around TCU. Now he's the assistant over there. Rob did it. They did an awesome job. They did a great job scouting us, and their kids got after us. And they're tough. They're good. You know, I mean, that team won at Northern Kentucky by 20. Last game they played, I think College Charleston, who beat Virginia Tech for the championship of their tournament. They shot 24 free throws and Kent State shot 4. And they lost at the buzzer. So, not rationalizing anything, just, I don't know if any of you guys follow Kent State like we do, like the opponents we play. When we play an opponent, we have an idea how good they are. And I was really impressed with Kent State. But I was also happy with the way our kids fought and hung in there. It's not easy to play good when your ball's not going in. You know, it's an easy game when that ball's going in. You know, we, other than, ouch. 2 for 17 from the 3. Countless free throws, shoot 32%. But you know what? There's not a lot of teams who can shoot 32% and win. You know, we did that against Oregon State to go to the Final Four because we have one thing that we're consistently good at year in and year out, and that's rebounding. And that's a big part of the game. You know, a lot of teams, if they can't make shots, have no chance of winning. You know, we're gonna have a lot of nights where the ball goes in. Next time we play, we look great offensively. But I'm glad our guys know that on nights we don't make shots, we still know how to win. And a lot of that has to do with our culture and how we prepare.
So once again, that was Houston head coach Kelvin Sampson talking post-game following Houston's 49-44 victory. And there you heard Kelvin touch on it towards the end right there, finding a way to win, in particular in regards to rebounding. That showed that the team itself, it showed its toughness in terms of not necessarily just letting, after a shooting performance, essentially kind of dictate that, not being able to figure out a way to win. They were able to claw it out, and to their credit, despite the multiple runs that Kent State did, which you heard it throughout, he gave major props to Kent State and really how scrappy they were, but finding a way to win. At the end of the day, that's what matters, and that's where Houston was able to do, and now here they are sitting at 6-0 with a chance at being ranked number 1 in the country.
And to add to another example of Kent State looking like the Cougars, they even double the post like the Cougars did. Sometimes they went monster.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So I was like, this is really interesting. And you can tell Coach Sindroff has worked with Coach Sampson before on so previous staffs. But so the low post options weren't there a lot. Juwan Arbor took advantage of it a little bit to get some of his points. He was one of the few Cougars to shoot 50% or better from the floor. Jarris Walker, he didn't have it today. I mean, he was out of rhythm. He passed up shots, passed up open looks. Jamal Mark did as well. So there's a lot of things to fix and tweak on the offense, but they're going to learn from a win to do that. So let's keep it moving. Get ready for the game on Tuesday.
Yeah, and this game kind of reminded me of games of last year when Houston wouldn't shoot the ball well, but they would still get the win. Probably in a few games last year where Houston didn't shoot the ball well, particularly after the injuries took place. There were a lot of times where Houston didn't shoot well, particularly Kyler, because we were so much depending on him making shots, because he was not our only shooter, but one of our best shooters last year. And so that performance, though I've seen this performance last year, but I've seen Houston win this type of game. And like Coach Sampson said, man, just knowing how to win when your shots aren't falling, that's the makes of a good team. That's what good teams do, in-game adjustments, and realize that, okay, maybe we're not having our best offensive game, but you can do the tangible things, the culture things, what Coach Sampson says, that still win and still can dictate a game like they did with rebounding. And you can see when Houston is probably the same size as a team, they're gonna out hustle and they're gonna out rebound the team, versus their last game when they were outside going against 2 7-footers and they got out rebounding. And so I think, no need to panic for me. This is a really good win against a good team who really fought and clawed and came out with a sense of urgency to start the game. And I think also we got to attribute to the ranking being a part of that. Every week, every game, with Houston being high ranked, potentially moving up to number 1, they're going to get every team's best game on a week-to-week basis. Every team is going to be looking to knock them off. It's going to be the biggest game on their schedule, most likely. And so, great team win. A lot of things that we could pick from it, but the main thing was just getting the win.
And it's like you were in the post game, Deion, because Coach Sampson said that he was asked about that. This team is going to get everybody's best shot. Everybody's best shot, not just because they're Houston anymore, because they're now number 2 and could be number 1 as of Monday. So this team, these young guys have not dealt with that pressure. And I'm sure that friends, maybe even some family, said to them yesterday, you guys know if y'all win the day, y'all be number 1 on Monday. You realize that? So that pressure built up to them as well. They're human. So I'm sure they heard that from friends, phone calls, tweets, whatever, IG, whatever. So they came out flat. Kent State took it to them early. So kudos to Kent State for getting that done and challenging the Cougars to go deep into find a way to win. And that's what the Cougs did. It wasn't great, but hey, I don't care about how you look. Did you win or lose? That's the bottom line.
And also, before you go in, and I think Reggie had some great minutes. Reggie did some really good things with his energy, his toughness, and I think this year is kind of reminiscent of other years where we don't really have a low post just score per se. We have people who can score in the low post, but I wouldn't say like Josh Carson is a low post scorer.
Mm-hmm.
Fabian is a low post scorer, and we don't really have that. I think J1 can score in the post, Jarris can score in the post, and so that's going to be a challenge on a game-to-game basis. But like Coach Sampson just said, making the bunnies, making the close range shots, that's going to be vital when you're not making shots from the outside. But Marcus Sasser, man, I can't talk about him enough. I mean, his just ability to close, his ability to finish, his ability to hunt shots on the moment the team go to him. It really takes a lot to step up in those situations. And it was good for me to see him doing that early, because I have full confidence that when we get down to February and March and April, that he's going to just continue to make those plays.
Dayon, you read my mind, because I was going to transition exactly to Reggie Chaney and the Bigs. But before we do that, once again, a reminder that you are watching / listening to Let's Rage Coogs, presented by the Sampson family. Also, shout out to our sponsors, Hoop and Holler, the Houston Micro Collective, the entity behind the name, image, and likeness commercials with the University of Houston. Star Pizza, they are behind the commercials for Star Pizza, who is one of our other sponsors for today's episode of Let's Rage Coogs, presented by the Sampson family. Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976. Also, a big shout out to BB's, the home of Tex Orleans Cooking. BB's, be sure to follow them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at BB's Tex Orleans. That's at BB's Tex Orleans on social media. And a shout out to the Fritz Kennel, the family owned and operated business that specializes in dog and cat boarding, daycare, and bathing. But on that note, I wanted to put this comment from Sean, who he said he joined late, but he wanted our thoughts on Jawan Roberts and Jarris Walker combo. And the reason I wanted to put this there, he says he wants to see more of JVA Francis. But I feel like Reggie Chaney, he was a big spark in today's game in particular. In regards to one of the things that Walker really struggled in was that rebounding category, because you could see Kelvin Sampson, he was frustrated a lot of times, especially when it came to long rebounds. Some Jarris just couldn't track down. And right before Houston.
Stop right there. You said couldn't. I'm going to challenge him and say he didn't track down. He's not
Yeah.
go after a lot of balls. He had balls bounce off his hands, like he just couldn't grip the ball and hold it today. That's one thing he's got to. He's a freshman. He's got to adapt and adjust and accept the Cougar culture and toughness and rebounding and dive on the floor. All those little things he's got to do to match his natural ability. Once he does that, he'll be a much more complete and consistent player.
Absolutely, especially when it came to those long rebounds. But right before Houston went on that 15-0 run, I think that was one of the key things where, Sampson was clearly frustrated. He put in Reggie Chaney, and Chaney not only provided stability in terms of being able to get rebounds. That's when Houston really shut things down against Kent State. But, I mean, he came up big. I know he had, I believe he was the one that had the go-ahead slam that put Houston up 32-30. And then on the following possession, he ended up coming away with a steal, which led to a Marcus Sasser fast break layup. So he was a big positive impact player. And then it makes it more impressive because, apparently, he was dealing with that bug that has been going around the entire Houston locker room heading into the game. So it just made his performance much more impressive. And that's one of the reasons why really he's kind of the veteran anchor among that front court group. When you mentioned Jarvis Walker, Jawan Roberts, they're both first. Walker's barely now the 6 games into his collegiate career. Jawan Roberts, this is barely his 6th game being able as that full-time starter. So it's still an adjustment period for them. And JVA Francis, he's still learning as well. This is the first time he's gotten consistent minutes here with the University of Houston.
Yeah, that play that you're referring to probably was one of the most impressive plays for me when Reggie got the steal on one of their best players and when it led to Marcus Sasser layup. But, man, Reggie, he's taken on the role that J1 had last year. Coming off the bench, being that tough player, bringing that toughness. And the difference between him and JVA is experience. And you can tell, it shows. I mean, JVA has all the skills, but when Reggie goes in, the experience that he has, he knows what the team needs in moments and how to execute it. And I just love he had a great game. He really, really had a great game. Of course, I mean, I'm sure Coach Sampson can nitpick and say he could have did more as far as rebounding and stuff like that. But just coming off the bench, bringing that energy and toughness and making plays, because basketball, it's a game of runs and it's a game of rhythm. Kent State went on a run to start the game. Houston fall back, went on a run to get back in it, went on a run in the second half. Kent State went on a run in the second half, and then Houston just ended up pulling away. But, man, this team, I really like what I see. I think it's on the game-to-game basis. I think as Jarris just continues to develop, continues to get more experience, he'll pick and choose his spots even more. I would like to see a conscious effort to get him the ball in an isolation situation to where he can be more aggressive, because oftentimes he catches it in different ways where he has the ability or a chance to make a play or make a shot. But I want to see a more of a conscious effort at times for him to get that isolated situation, for him to get a shot, to make a play, and whether he makes it or not, but just to get the ball in his hands for him to kind of catch or get a rhythm.
And to your point, he was so out of sorts today. He got a look down the stretch mid-post, and he started a reverse dribble. If he'd have finished his move, he had a layup or a dunk, baseline. He stopped and passed it out because he just, I don't know if he just didn't have the confidence in himself or whatever to finish the play or whatever. But yes, he needs to get some touches in the post, mid-post, etc., and just accept your natural instincts. Let them take over and finish at the rim. Don't pass it up. He was passive today. We know he's a good passer, but sometimes get your shot too, man. It's okay. You're a good player as well. So he was trying to be too passive sometimes down the stretch. He'll learn from it. He'll bounce back. But learning while you win is a good thing. It's a great thing.
Yeah, he's not aggressive enough. Not aggressive enough in times.
Which is weird.
When he has it going, he's aggressive. So I guess that's a credit to him. But yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, once again, I'd like to remind everyone that they are watching or listening to Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian family. And I'm going to toss it over here with Marcus Sasser, Jamal Shedd, and Kelvin Sampson. He actually talked about potentially being ranked number 1, which, Chris, I don't know about you. That surprised me, the answer he gave me here with Kelvin Sampson, I had to say.
And it was a great answer, and I was very surprised that he gave a lengthy, detailed answer about it.
Yeah.
Don't have to cause no help and just force the opponent to make tough shots. And then just keep shooting when I'm open and giving a chance for our bigs to rebound. I think they did a great job doing that.
Before your layup there at the end, kind of a defense, but Carey slipped, and it looked like he slipped, and you guys stole the ball from there. It was that moment, that play to give you some breathing room.
I feel like that was just one of the winning, like I said, trying to make a winning play down to the wire. Couldn't really do it on offense, so like I said, try to impact the game in another way. So trying to get that stop, and I feel like that's what we did.
Kind of Marcus, building off that late game situation, how do you feel that you and Jamal, just overall the team, were able to execute down the stretch in the last minute? I mean, you guys were down, and you guys not only scored but got a couple of defensive stops as well.
I feel like we needed that. Just having this moment early, it just give us confidence for games later on down the road, and just taking care of the ball in the clutch. And like I said, I feel like we needed that, so we'll have experience under our belt going into more games when we have close games at the end, knowing how to close it out.
Chris Gardner, please. Jamal, what are your thoughts on K-State's defense?
They swarmed. We've never turned the ball over like this year. And I think it was a great learning curve for us, especially me. I had 4 turnovers today, 3 in about the first 5 minutes. Can't do that again. So just a learning curve.
Go ahead, Coach.
Kelvin, you mentioned about when you have the ranking of number 2, or people are going to get up. They're going to want to beat you. Is there a little bit difference when 2 versus if you're a 1?
I don't know. I've never been a 1. I don't know. I guess I'm used to being ranked. Ranked. I think I don't remember. We made the NCAA tournament, lost a double overtime game to Boston College when I was at Washington State. We're ranked all 12 years at Oklahoma. Indiana, I'm sure we're ranked. We've been ranked 5 or 6 straight years here. So we're used to having a high level of success. But I don't know that we change other than you change. You guys are going to change. Because you have to. You have to ask those questions. You wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't. Everybody gets ranked number 2, number 1. When you rank 20th and 21st, you don't get asked those questions. It's like, if you're from somewhere and you go home and people say, wow, you've changed. Not really. They've changed. They don't realize it. So because of the questions we're going to get asked, we have no choice but to embrace it. And you should. It's a great accomplishment. Don't run from it. It's not like we went online and applied for it and waited for a response back and we found, hey, guess what, fellas, we got accepted to law school, i.e. we were ranked number 2 or whatever. No, we've been working for this. But remember, it's a rental. You don't own it. We're just renting it. Because somebody else is going to be number 1. North Carolina, look what that kid did yesterday. He had to make, he made 10 threes. That's what it took. Somebody make 10 threes, we can lose 2. So, but I'm proud of our program for where we've, a lot of you guys in here weren't here in 2014-15, so you don't really know where we came from. Reading about something is a lot different than experiencing it. A lot of you guys were, but I just remember where we were in 14-15, and to be sitting here with an opportunity, whether we are or not after today, who knows? I don't know. Obviously, I'm proud of, happy for all the guys that came before us. There's a lot of programs out there that North Carolina's been number 1 more times than I've been alive. So it's no big deal to them, but it should be a big deal to us, to everybody here. It should be.
Once again, that was head coach Kelvin Sampson and Chris Dayon. We'll start with that headliner that he kind of walked it off with, just in terms of it should mean a lot to the program. And we're talking about it is an interesting tidbit where he mentioned he had never been ranked number 1 before, even going back to the days with his Oklahoma teams. That's something that To me, it shows how rare it is to potentially be the number one team in the country, which it's barely November. And for all you know, it's not guaranteed. But just to be in that conversation, it shows, like he said, from where the program was when he took it over to where it is now, a night and day difference. And Chris, you always tell us this just in regards to the golden ages, the golden days we're in right now.
No question, man. I mean, I was here. I mean, I've covered the Cougs 30 years, so I've seen a lot of dark days. But the first couple of years Coach Sampson took over, you could not have convinced me or anybody in the building watching the program, watching the team, that the Cougs would be 7-8 years later potentially ranked number one in the country. So from that standpoint, it is a major accomplishment and a salute to him and the staff and the players. Y'all know it. I'm not going to pour too much cold water on it, but it's nice to be ranked number one November 28th, 29th, whatever. Dayon, Andy, Apollo, Raymond, Joe, Sammy. As an old alum, I just want the final ranking of the season to come out and the Cougs number one. Then it'll be that much more.
Yeah, I agree. And me and Andy talked about this a little bit on our last podcast, and I think the ranking right now during this time is more prideful for alums like us. Like, we can go and talk to other people who went to other schools and be like, yeah, well, we're number one. And so it feels good like that. And it is big, like Coach Sampson said. And so I'm going to be very prideful when we get that ranking, I'm going to speak it to existence. And like he said, that was really good how it was funny. Like, we didn't apply for this.
Yeah.
And so that was Coach Sampson classic right there. And it was earned. And so, man, I'm going to be very, very prideful. I'm going to talk about trash to other people. Whoever want it, they can get it. And so, man, it is big and it means a lot for sure, man.
And let me say this. I remember it because the last time it ranked, probably, I think the tweet was out. The last one for the season was March 14th, my birthday, 1983, I think. But during that season, they were ranked number one, and my dad bought me 2 shirts, Phi Sigma Gamma number one and Cougs ranked number one. I still have those shirts. So they go on, and I hope Houston Athletics puts on sale some number one shirts.
Yeah.
Next week, I'm going to buy one and put it right next to the ones I had 40 years ago. So I'm looking forward to that because it is a hell of an accomplishment.
Absolutely. And the comment by King Jaja is something that Kelvin Sampson alluded to. Number one for North Carolina, it always seems like they've been the number one, or they're always near the top. Houston should be proud because we're not a blue blood. I like how he added the yet at the end of his comment there.
And the yet is good, but I mean, this program is blue collar. I remember Justin Gorin telling us that we're blue collar, not blue blood. So do we want to be blue blood or just be blue collar?
I think Kelvin kind of said it himself in that comment. He said one of the identity pieces for each team is going to be that rebounding. It's part of their culture, and rebounding goes with part of that blue collar mentality. And that's something that Kelvin Sampson himself said it a few days ago, where really that's what they have to instill on a lot of these players, that toughness, not letting other teams really. When you look at teams in the past, that's something that Kelvin, even at the top, he said there's not a lot of teams that come in here and punch them first. It's something that Houston has done in the past. So it's going to be, as the success continues to go forward, it's going to be interesting to see how they respond, because like King Jaja mentioned as well, that now they're going to have, if they're number two, obviously they already had a big target. Number one, there's going to be a target night in and night out, and not only from whoever their opponent is, but national media. There's going to be people watching. The moment they're down in the second half, there's going to be millions of tweets. Oh, Houston's on upset alert. So it's going to be interesting to see how they bounce on, or how they react to that. And again, it's still not signed in stone yet. And I like that quote from Kelvin, said, even if they are number one, it's not, they don't own it. It's rented, because they're going to be gunning for it. At the end of the day, it doesn't become permanent until, like you said, Chris, that final poll at the end of the season. One of the final things before we start wrapping things up, going back to Marcus Sasser and what he said about that late game execution, he said he felt that they needed it, something that they can go back on as the season progresses and really learn from this and gain that experience. Dan, I'll toss it over to you first. How do you feel Houston responded just in terms of that late minute and being able to execute, especially led by Jamal Shedd and Sasser? It seemed like they did a good job of being able to lead Houston to the finish line in this game.
I think it just is something that can carry over. I think it bodes well for the confidence of the team to know that we have our top two guards who are going to lead us and execute when the game gets tight. And so I think it's a huge learning moment as well for the younger guards, because it can be times where they could be on the court in those moments, and you can have your teammates be like, look, this is what you can do, and they can give advice and help kind of coach them in those moments. So I think it's huge to have your top two guards execute and come up big in your first close game of the year. And then going forward, they can just help continue to lead the team, but help kind of teach the team in those moments. This is what we need to do. This is what I saw when they break it down for him and things like that. So I think it's definitely huge, especially from Marcus Sampson. I mean, I'm very, very impressed, because if you look at the last NCAA championship teams, all of those were guard-driven teams. Like college basketball in the tournament, you got to have guards that can get busy and carry you to the promised land.
And one thing Coach Sampson mentioned, that the freshmen right now, they're not reacting. They're trying to figure out, okay, coach call a play. What am I supposed to do? So they're not executing when they're on the floor. So that's going to come with experience and getting more comfortable in the system as the season progresses. But until then, you got vets like Marcus Sasser and Jamal Shed to carry the load and help them execute and get a bucket when needed.
One of the final things first, King George, like he said, I got an ESPN update in the second half about the Cougs on upset alert. That's the rest of the way for the season. I did want to bring up a comment by Kickface. How the stadium did the World Cup affect attendance? Well, and I'll give my 2 cents, and then Chris, you can follow up, because as it always is, it was a late arriving crowd. I thought it was going to be dismal. Even the student section that was on the floor, that part of the student section, it wasn't as crowded, but I think as the game progressed, it certainly filled out a lot more. And I mean, I felt like the crowd was great and when they needed to be, especially when Houston starting to get runs and made their ultimate run to be able to close out and win the game. This was certainly and I'm curious to get your thoughts from my perspective. This was certainly the best atmosphere the whole season so far.
Atmosphere was good. I mean, I think Houstonians are late arriving fans. I mean, that's part of the traffic in the area, in the neighborhood, and distance folks travel, live. Not many fans live near University of Houston. That's part of it as well. Also, part of it was Kent State. And Dan, Andy, I harp on it. There's still too many fans that do not come see the Cougs play. With a chance to be number one, this place could have been packed before tip-off. But it wasn't, because it was Kent State. We got to do better with that, okay? So that's I'm going to keep harping on that. And parking is still there are areas that need to be improved. Parking issues still an issue. Traffic is getting better. Construction is getting better around the stadium and the arena. But I mean, we got a plan for that too. If we're going to have a problem with parking, get earlier. Deal with it earlier. I mean, what else can you say about it? Get here earlier and try to get here, because once conference play starts, not have that many great teams name-wise to come in, but you're coming to see one of the best teams in the country. So come see them, get here early, be loud, and stay loud for the game.
Not only that, probably potentially the number one team in the country.
Yes. That right there should be enough incentive for fans to get here early to the games.
Absolutely. And as we wrap things up, once again, you're watching and listening to Let's Rage Coogs, presented by the Saxenian family. Big shout out to Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Micro Collective, Star Pizza, BB's, and the Fritz Kennel for being a sponsor on today's episode of Let's Rage Coogs. Reminder that we will be back in approximately 5 hours for the post-game conclusion of Houston football and their final regular season game of the season against Tulsa. And they will look to close out senior night on a positive note. Houston will be looking to finish the regular season 8-4. But on that note, final thoughts. I'll go across the panel. Chris, I'll go with you first. What were your final takeaways from this game, and what can you expect? Houston returns to action on Tuesday, 7 p.m. inside the Fertitta Center against Norfolk State.
Just simple message. I ran into Jamal Shed, who was coming down to the court for the show, and just said, and he said it too, a win is a win. That's it.
Yep, and that's a takeaway from me. It wasn't cute, but it's a dub. It counts in the win column. Like Coach Sampson said, when you think months down the line, you're not going to look back, oh, well, you only won by X amount of points. A win is a win, and it's a good experience to get this experience early in the year on what it takes to win a close game. I mean, you can't understate on what that means, because another blowout, how really much does that really help Houston? So I'm glad that they were challenged in the way that they were challenged and didn't play their best game, but still came out victorious.
That's the beauty of college basketball. Any given day, any given outing, doesn't matter who the opponent is. That's what makes March Madness one of the most exciting tournaments, because there's always that Cinderella story. You never know who's going to come in here and beat you on a given night. Once again, the final score, number 2 Houston survives Kent State. They defeat Kent State 49-44. The leading scorer for Houston was Marcus Sasser. He had 19 points on 5 of 16 shooting, 1 for 10 from the 3-point line. He was 8 for 8 on free throws, including a couple of clutch free throws down the stretch, multiple clutch free throws down the stretch for Houston. Jawan Roberts, he had a double-double with 11 points and 14 rebounds. Once again, Houston returns to action this coming Tuesday at 7 p.m. against Norfolk State. Once again, this has been Let's Rage Coogs, presented by the Saxenian family. We'll be back in a few hours for Let's Rage Coogs, the final regular season game of the final regular season football game for the Houston Cougars football team. Once again, Let's Rage Coogs, presented by the Saxenian family. Thank you guys for all of you that joined us, and we will see you next time.
Go Cougars.